and welcome to this week's look at action and stunts on film and television. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me once again. We will get straight into it because we are doing top 10 lists. I know, but these are Bond ones and they're from the fans. So we've decided to have a little look about, and we've been approached by a number of individuals who have top 10 lists, their favourite action or stunt moments from the Bond pictures. We are starting this week with a gentleman who is called Chris Eels, and you may know him on Twitter at Big Red Trousers on Twitter. He is a bit of a book fiend. He loves the Bond books as well, a huge fan of the movies, and knows a thing or two about what he likes when it comes to action. I had a chat with him during the course of last month, and this is what he came up with. Is with us to discuss some action cues and stunts from Bond. And we'll have a go through them and see what's come up. He's prepared a bunch for us. And if you want to start at the top, work your way down. Let's look at the first one and find out why it's there.
So the first one is one of the big ones. It's the damn jump from GoldenEye.
Right.
This was my first Bond in the cinema. I was 15 and hadn't seen any on the big screen beforehand. Okay. After the drought from License to Kill, you know, what was it going to be? What was going to happen? And this is how they open the movie. And it is just terrific. It's terrific. It's a shame that we had seen most of it in the trailer already.
Yeah.
But it was still jaw-dropping. And yeah, just like it's setting out their stall. Bond is back. This is the sort of stuff that you're going to get. Comparable to the ski jump opening in The Spy Who Loved Me, for that sort of jumping off of a high point.
And the silence.
And exactly. Yeah. There's just that, well, in the down jump, you get that little bit of the wind.
You do, yeah.
Is there complete silence in The Spy Who Loved Me, or is there the wind as well?
I think it's possibly the same sort of thing, but if there had been any score leading up to it, it then stops, doesn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. There's the cutoff, and then you're just, and just free-falling. It just goes on and on and on. It's amazing.
Were you familiar with bungee jumps up until that point? Had you heard about them, or you thought, oh, that's, you know, the Dangerous Sports Club, I think, was probably the one organization that had done it leading up to that. They used to do them in very peculiar places, but I'd never really seen one on a big scale until then.
I'd seen some done off of scaffolding.
Yes.
Around. You know, that no one had really done it off of a building or a high point or a bridge up until then, I think, from my, you know, naive youth, not being aware of such things. I'm sure I saw something on Noel's house party. I'm sure I saw other bits and bobs. I'm like, oh, this is something that's come out of New Zealand. This, you know, they do it there. Yeah. But it wasn't big. And I think this was one of the first big in the cinema experiences of it.
I think so. Certainly there had been wire gags in the past where performers had been attached to wires and had fallen great distance. Nonetheless, this was a physical bungee jump, and the Oxford Bungee Company were approached to come up with a way in which it could be done. Obviously, the biggest drop that had ever happened before, and Wayne Michaels approached by Simon Crane and gone, well, you can do this, you know. And you go, yeah, okay, I'm game for it, because that's the sort of guy that Wayne is, you know.
Well, just sort of nudging. Go on, you could do this. It's all right. Go on.
Normally, in that situation, what happens is the stunt coordinator would go, and presumably in advance, he's let Wayne know that he'd like him to do this. But often, what happens is on the set at some point they go, right, who's going to do the bungee jump? There's people walking away and putting their hands in their pockets and all that sort of stuff, leaving one bloke going, hello, lads, where have you gone? You know, me. But not on this occasion. He was very, very game. A fabulous double for Pierce. And used, and that's the other thing I quite like about this, is that it's him the entire sequence up until the eyes,
Yeah.
that shot of going past the camera once the pitong's been fired. So it's a really terrific use of Wayne, his super hair that he had originally,
Oh,
plus any additional hair which was added
wonderfully
at some point.
coiffured, flying through the
Marvelous,
air. It's
absolutely
marvelous.
marvelous. Yeah, it's a tricky one to beat, isn't it? But again, you throw a stick at a uh, everyday cinema goer as opposed to a Bond fan, and chances are that's going to be mentioned, isn't it, at some
Yeah,
point? I would have thought.
yeah. People
Um,
remember it. But it's also that thing of most people do bungee jumps off a bridge into open space, whereas this is being done against a wall, and it's sort of that thing of you're falling next to,
yes,
if the wind blows you, you're going to go into the wall and you're going to get creamed.
yeah,
It's just that added level of danger because it's against the wall. It really,
and you
a
can
minor
see
detail.
that in his body movement as he's going through the air. He's having to adjust.
Yeah,
Arms are
but
having to move, adjust slightly, just to compensate for the buffering that he's getting on the way down.
yeah, but also you say that the body movement, that's just reminding me as he's going through, there's a point because obviously he's doing the swan dive,
Yes,
and then there's that point where I don't know if it's the bungee sort of
it will be.
takes
It'll
the
be the cord
slack,
taking over. Yeah,
and he then flips forward into a nosedive. And it's that point we think, oh my god, he is going to hit the wall. What's going to
yeah.
happen? And then out of shot, the rocks sort of cover him, and yeah, it's just moment after moment after moment. You start adding it up, and you think, bloody hell, this is
Yeah,
amazing.
it's absolutely extraordinary, and his timing throughout the whole thing. As soon as that the bungee cable kicks in, and he is launched forwards into that position, he's got to remember I'm acting, right? He's just dropped 750 feet. He's then got to be Bond for the next couple of seconds because he's got to go inside the jacket, pull out the gun, hold the position, and disappear behind the rock in one take. And it's absolutely
Yeah.
extraordinary. Really, really is.
How many
But
times did they do it?
three,
They did 3 jumps.
they did three. And
Okay.
pretty much every time was exactly the same.
Okay.
I think they were just making absolutely sure that they'd covered every box had been ticked,
Yeah.
just to make it absolutely sure. And that the crane driver was happy and the rigging team were happy and everybody was good. Right, we've got it. We can move on now.
Move on. Move on quickly.
We've done this. But as you say, there's they did show a great deal of it in the trailer. You have those moments in movies where they get so excited about one thing that they just give it to you, and you go,
Yeah.
"Wow, it's not really exciting then when you see it." But
This is
it did make a difference when I saw it, I must admit.
if you hadn't have had that in the trailer and that was the opening salvo,
Yeah.
that would have been even more impactful. It's like in The Spy Who Loved Me. If they hadn't have had the ski jump in the trailer, it's just that added little thing of don't give the audience everything. Hold something back.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't
The
put all your
marketing
stunts in
people have
one
a lot to
basket.
answer for.
Quite right. Right. So that's certainly the first one. And what a way to start. Now, how do you follow that? What's next on your list?
Well, just because it's part of the same film, at the end of GoldenEye, in the final fight, this is one of those little minor moments that sort of happen and bang, you're on to the next shot.
Mhm.
But in the final fight, just as Sean Bean is coming up in his little gondola lift,
Yes.
he starts shooting Pierce. Pierce does a barrel roll down the stairs,
Mm.
and it looks so like heavy and painful and like really because he's running down the stairs and then the gun starts firing, so you get the bullet ricochets all around you, and it's not even like he crouches down and rolls, it's a leap and roll forward down the stairs, and you think if someone did that on a metal staircase, it's going to break their back. How did that how did that happen?
Well, yeah, it's a lovely moment. And Jamie, who's the stunt man who did that, it's not Wayne on this occasion, it's Jamie. Um, uh, did pretty much that. They've lined the steps just a touch.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really afford to do too much, but it is probably just a touch. He's wearing padding on the back,
Yeah.
Jamie Edgell, the stunt man, and also, as with stair falls, this is connected. I mean, this is not necessarily a stair fall, but it's the same principle. If you go at it with speed, momentum, you get it over and done with fairly quickly, and B, because of the situation that Bond is in, he's being fired upon from below. The shots are being fired up at him, so he's trying to dive through the air over whatever shots are being hit at him and get down to the bottom to cover as quickly as possible. And it's one of those moments that you go, Jesus, it really does throw the kitchen sink at it, doesn't it? At speed,
Yeah.
because he's pegging along.
Oh
He's
yeah,
running,
he's
running, running, and bounce, then flies through the air, and it's a beautiful forward roll, and then lands at the bottom. Where ironically, then it's a stage setup, and Wayne then takes over to jump down over the balustrade down onto the next landing. So Jamie Edgell does the dive, and then Wayne Michaels does the drop down onto the thing. And it's one of those terrific moments, but it is a blink and you'll miss it moment. It's fantastic, I must admit. Good. Okay, so we've covered a bit of GoldenEye. What's next?
Next, we're heading into the past, the distant past, with the man with the golden gun, and it
Ah,
is the car corkscrew.
right. This
Now,
this is probably the most it's not the most mentioned stunt, certainly, but it would be, I would say, the most iconic, really,
yes, it's
because of its perfection.
yeah, and it's weird because it's visually stunning, but it's tarnished, and I'd say almost a little bit by bad editing and the Swanee whistle
Yeah.
and it just, but the stunt still shines through. And correct me if I'm wrong, this was the first stunt that was worked out on computer.
Yes, yes, it was, and a very we use the word computer in its very loosest form, I think here.
I
This
mean, this is something
particular
that probably
one
filled a room.
filled a room, yeah, exactly, and they've worked out the speed, the trajectory, the balance, most importantly, and it was then taken up and used in a live stunt show scenario.
Yeah.
But the uh, Bumps Willard, who was the guy who did the jump, had never done the jump before. The first time he ever did it was on that take,
Just
because
like Bond. I ain't never done anything like that before.
neither have I, actually.
Neither have
That
I.
sort of thing. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
never done it before, and the all the situations surrounding it. That was why that movie, I think, was quite exciting, because of the live stunt fit. We had that with Live and Let Die, with all of those different stunt coordinators and different people coming in from different areas, mostly from a live action stunt show performance basis. And here's a great example of it. The editing you mentioned. What's the situation from your point of view from the edit?
It just
Is it
it's
because it's
that
one
weird thing
locked
of,
off shot?
it's what I like, the purity of, it's just one shot and the car goes from one side of the screen to the other.
Yeah,
But the kind of almost Smokey and the Bandit crazy before and after that you're all caught up in, then to suddenly get this pure moment,
yeah,
and it's like it's the greatest stunt you've ever seen, but presented poorly, which is crazy because it is just that beautiful one shot. It's almost as if uh you need the camera on the other side of the river,
right.
seeing the car go through that turn, and maybe try and cut into that. It's because it's so quick as well.
Yes.
It
I
Yeah.
think there's a couple of things. factored in. Firstly, because the team and the performers are from a live stunt show performance, if there had been 6 cameras running to cover the entire thing, it may not have looked as realistic as it does with a locked off camera shot. However, Cubby, I think, had the best line, or was it Harry Saltzman, one or the other, who said, you know, it would be great if we could do it and get a couple of police cars in the water to kind of accentuate the fact that he's gone through the air and done it, and right behind him is another guy who's going to have a go and then just drops into the clong, you know, that type of thing, to maybe say, well, that's how good Bond is. He can do this without ever having a go, you know. But you do see gags in pictures, car stunts, where they have a number of cameras, and it's on the car, it's under the bridge, it's on a drone over the top, and it's all sorts, and the whole thing edited together makes the jump look huge, but maybe just takes something away from that final product.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It maybe comparatively, the only shot that comes to mind immediately at the beginning of Octopussy, when the giant hangar explodes. They've done the jet going through, and then the missile comes in afterwards, and the hangar explodes. And that explosion happens 3 times.
Yes.
Like, you see close up, then you see a wide, and then you see really wide. And even though it's the same explosion happening 3 times, you know, it's movie editing.
Yes.
Excitement. You don't notice that you're just watching the same thing over and over
again. Yes, exactly.
So
it does give the impression it's one explosion followed by another, instead of just one filmed 3 times.
Yeah. So can you film the corkscrew or present it in 3 different shots? And it's that thing of how big a distance is it? Can it be cut in the middle and see a bit of rotation and then go back again? And then, of course, there's the Swanee whistle, which I don't know. Part of me thinks, it's fun because it is overall a fun sequence in a fun movie, but also it kind of takes you away from it.
I'd like to have been in that meeting because I assume that whistle is added outside of John Barry's remit. It can't have been something that he would have said, I've got an idea. How don't we do this? You know, the man who gave us the line in Winter is going, how about a Swanee whistle? I just can't see it happening. I can see somebody going in. It needs something. I know. What about this? Yeah, that'll work.
Call up John from
John Barry,
percussion department. We'll get the Swanee whistle out.
Who's the best Swanee whistle player in the UK currently? Do we have a list of that? Can we compile that list?
Can we compile a list? Get me the Swanee whistle.
The Bureau. Hello, Bureau of Swanee Whistles. Who do you want? Right, hang on.
I'll see who's available in the Far East.
No, they're all working currently. How's that possible? Yeah, how very peculiar. It's an extraordinary moment. It is. It's a lovely car. It's a great idea, and only really been done twice since in other ventures. I'm trying to think. Oh, Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels did a thing in connection with Red Bull, and they created a corkscrew jump, which was done for real back in 2016, I think, 2015, 2016. And this car that was doing it was traveling at way faster than the car in the picture. And it was landing, not even landing square on its wheels. It's the perfection of the one in the movie. It takes off, it turns, and it lands completely square on its wheels and drives off.
It's not even as if there's no heavy landing. It literally just
exactly
graceful. And maybe that's part of the problem as well. that it doesn't.
Just too perfect.
It's just too perfect.
Yeah.
But it's still worthy of recognition.
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, the little car chase leading up to it's nice, but that is the payoff, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean when even the J turn he does in.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah,
that is really really good. I
yeah,
do like a J
absolutely
turn.
spots it there. Right, okay, so we're making progress here. We've got the dam jump from GoldenEye. We've got the Bond diving down in GoldenEye on the Arecibo, and we've got the car jump from the Man with the Golden Gun. 3 big hits there. What's next on your list?
Again, it's a minor moment, just a little touch from Skyfall, grabbing the elevator.
Oh yeah, nice.
So
okay.
We're in Shanghai, I think.
Yes.
And this assassin has shot the security guard. He's got into the lift, and Bond is watching him. He's pressed the button, and the lift starts to go up. And you just think, how is Bond going to follow him? And there's a very swift sort of 1, 2, 3 moment, and suddenly Bond is hanging beneath the elevator.
Yes.
And it's just that thing of like you got to leap onto one thing, leap onto the roof of the door guard, whatever it is,
Yeah,
and then leap again and hang onto the lift in time to actually catch it. Because if you miss that bar, you're going to fall forward and smack on the floor. So it's just that a very elegant, but just whoa, okay, and now
that's it. I mean,
it
is making something, and I think that's a lot with many of the things in Bond. Bond, the action man, has to make complicated action look really, really simple. There's a lovely moment in GoldenEye. We were talking about it just a moment ago, but there's a lovely moment in GoldenEye. Bond is reloading his gun, or he's trying to set the timer on the limpet mine, and there is gunfire going all around him, and there's that lovely ricochet moment where he just turns his head. He doesn't go, Jesus. He just turns his head and then carries on doing what he's doing. It's as smooth can be. And if you'd walked in the movie, which you probably could do back then, if you walked into the movie at that moment, you know that guy's the hero. From just that movement alone, it's breathtaking. Similarly here, Daniel Craig as Bond must react quickly but effectively as the character, and leaping up onto, I think that's it might be a card swab, or a swipe rather, or something of that nature. He stands on the top of it and leaps up. And it's a very elegant movement. It's the sort of thing you'd expect from an Olympic high jumper, for instance. They've worked out the steps leading up to the hop, skip, bounce, go moment. Done on a stage, with an amount of green screen below, obviously for that other sequence of Daniel going up. But that initial getting on is a lovely moment. Was done for real, and has took a great deal of time to work out the steps in order to get there in the first place. But you've pointed out there quite correctly, the graceful nature of him doing this. And then the other moment I like in that sequence as he's going up is he realizes he can't hang on with both hands much longer. He's lost the strength in one arm. That was a lovely moment.
Well, because it's almost narratively correct, because we've seen earlier in the film he was shot in the shoulder, and then he dug out the bullet,
as you do.
As you do with your old.
No need for NHS waiting lists when Bond's around. We'll just whip it out. That's what we'll do.
What is it? A Sykes Fairburn throwing knife? He probably
finally getting to use that thing on the Swiss Army knife for taking the stones out of horses' hooves, or taking the bullets out of assassins' shoulders. That's it.
Always handy. It will come in.
Never leave the office without one.
Yeah, but yes, you're right. It's that, and it's a long shot where you. Looking at him hanging below and getting higher and higher, the floors are going by at a terrific pace, and suddenly he just loses his grip, and it's okay, but it gets it back on again. As you're right, it's a little bit of added thrill. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, all of that's probably done on a green screen. It's
Yes, it would have been, but the idea that the character is going to say, right, I'm going to get up and I'm going to follow this guy, and then he doesn't realize how far he's got to go in
yeah,
order to. When the hell is this lift going to stop? You know, it just
slightly
keeps
out of his
hanging under it,
depth.
and in his brain, he's going, "Don't let go, don't let go, keep strong, don't let." Oh my God, my right arm's going. I can't. No, 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 no. All of that stuff that you would do. It's so accurate. It's really, really. It's a lovely, lovely scene. It's a brilliant sequence.
Yeah,
Um,
really good.
I imagine that building in London where they filmed that, the outside of that is just covered in tourists on a regular basis,
Of
uh,
course, paying tribute.
queuing up to have a go inside the lobby and find, hang on, this building's nothing like the one we've just looked at. What's that about? Very weird. So yes, nice entry there for Skyfall. That's a lovely moment. I like that. The elevator grab. What's next on your list?
Next is Thunderball.
Oh,
Another little moment.
hmm
So at the end of the film, all is lost for Largo and Spectre, and they're making a fast getaway, having been defeated in the scuba battle.
yes,
And it's just climbing aboard the Disco Volante at speed. You know, this thing is now, you've realized it's a hydrofoil. And you see Bond climb out of the water and up the strut
yes.
of the hydrofoil and then onto the boat. And I don't know how quick this thing is going, but it must be 50, 60 miles an hour through the water.
Yeah,
And
it certainly later on in that sequence there is footage that is sped up, but that
yes,
moment when he's climbing aboard, he is shifting through the water. You look at the wake at the back there, and you can use. There's a great deal of displacement, and it's really shifting. So I
yeah,
would say certainly probably somewhere between 40 and 60 miles an hour,
yeah.
and it's Bob Simmons. You know, it is
The,
Bob on location doing it for real.
so it's the boat's clipping along, and it must be filmed from a helicopter.
Mm,
So they're going along in tandem, and he's just climbing up. And it's a simple move, but everything's wet, and one slip, and you're going to fall. And if you're
yeah.
lucky, you're just going to fall in the water. If you're unlucky, you're going to fall into the path of two high-speed propellers.
Well, there's nothing really lucky about falling in the water at 60 miles an hour when you're not prepared for it. It won't be the greatest landing in the world,
No.
and it could be, as the Americans refer to it, coitons, if
Acquaintance.
you're not careful. Bob would have probably worked out some form of. I'm under the impression that a couple of handholds were put along the way,
Mhm.
maybe underneath, screwed in place by John Steers and the team, so he could literally get a handhold on it and be able to stay put. Maybe a foothold somewhere in the similar vein,
Yeah.
to try and keep his balance. But you know, he's got a wetsuit on, oh, half a wetsuit. You know, he's got no bottoms on at all. He's just got his trunks on,
I think
and
it's
he's
barefoot as well because
barefoot. You know,
take the flippers off.
there's none of that previous sequence where he's shoes, no shoes, shoes, no shoes, as you see in the edit. He's definitely barefoot, and it is, you know, it's a great deal of speed, a great deal of accuracy, and he's got to get from point A to point B, and then eventually get inside. You know, so
Yeah.
there's a, it is, it's a another moment that people maybe don't take into consideration when they look at it. They go, oh look, there's Bond getting in, but no, that's really somebody on the side of that hydrofoil, and that hydrofoil is going at some clip,
Yeah.
you know,
It
and
is
God forbid you
dangerous.
fall off the thing. What's next now? We're about part way through. What's the next one?
Yep, I think this is number 6, if my counting is right. This is a big one. I say a big one. It's a sequence on Her
Right.
Majesty's Secret Service, the stock car race,
Oh yeah.
and often overlooked and possibly a bit excessive because it adds very little to the chase
Yes.
overall. You know, they're being chased down a mountain, and then suddenly we're in a stock car race on ice, and what the hell's going on now? Coordinating a race and including Bond and Tracy is one thing, but then adding in Spectre and Imra Bunt and the goons, it's like it lifts it to another level. And Some cars are running four abreast. The snow's going everywhere. Some of the shots look like they've actually destroyed the camera that they were using to film it
Very much so,
because they
yeah.
get so close. I mean, it's just a bright, glorious Technicolor spectacle for no reason other than we can. And cars are flipping everywhere. And then the Spectre Mercedes, the big saloon that they're in, that flips over
Yeah.
and it explodes. And it's such a quick cut, but I'm sure the flame, the explosion, actually catches one of the people trying to escape the car.
Yes,
like
big George Cooper. George Cooper got his backside burnt there, and had scars for many years. In fact, he talks about it in a television program in 1986, which was luckily for him, that was his worst accident on set. That explosion went off, and it wasn't the fact that it went off early; it went off when it should have been. But it's ice, and he's trying to get out, get some footing, and clear the area where that explosion is going to be, and couldn't be in two places at once, and it got him, you know.
Yeah.
So there are a number of things going on. It does seem like a fantastical chase, but my understanding of it, if I'm trying to read this correctly, is that leading up to that, there are two vehicles, possibly three. There's the Tracy's car and a couple of chase cars.
Yes.
And it's a great deal of windy road, snow both sides, maybe cutting the corner on one occasion, and then cutting back to studio footage with back projection of the back of the other car and cutting back. So there's not a great deal of, and it's at night, you know, so you're having to rely on the headlights here and headlights there and that sort of thing. And I think to kind of accentuate what's going on, and also to tick the box of really how good Tracy is as an individual, not only as a woman, but as a driver in this instance, they arrive at, you know, go to that crowd that might confuse them. So they turn left into the thing, and all of a sudden, and they're cracking gags, you know, round the whole. It looks like we've hit the rush hour and all this sort of stuff. And when they win the race, she says, we didn't even wait to collect the prize, you know, all this stuff. Done very cleverly, built specifically. This is the other thing. That ice course was built for the purpose of the picture. It didn't exist. And Anthony Squire, who was the second unit director, wanted to make sure that the vehicles that were going round, I think there was 6 in total, but they've done it in such a way and made it look like there's a great many vehicles on there.
Yes.
They've managed to get some of the best rally drivers of the time from Sweden, Finland, a couple of German guys in there as well, and reuse them in various situations so they can control the slide of the car, and be able to judge the speed of the whole thing, and then moving crowd around. What was the scene I saw not too long ago? I think it was a Star Wars. It was the first reboot of the Star Wars, the Phantom Menace, and they had the speeder chase, speeder racing, and the crowd evidently were made up of little match heads or something of that nature, and then they were CG'd in afterwards. Well, this is to a sequence where you've got a section of crowd. Right, this is where the action is going to happen, and then they simply move that crowd over there a bit more, and then move that crowd over there a bit more, and maybe try and splice the whole thing together. So it's quite inventive as well, not just from a driving point of view, but also from a camera perspective and a general overview of the action. And can we get it all done in one shot, or do we need to edit here and there? And then I think one of my favorite shots in it is is when the car flips upside down, and the guy, because it's filmed the right way up, but it's just filmed.
You look through the window and you can see everyone has been upside down.
Yes, just have a moment. And I hadn't really thought about it, and then I look at it again and go, wait a second. But you don't, but it's quick enough to you go, oh my God, it's flipped over. And he's looking, and that's a funny thing. The funny gag, the guy's looking as he's sliding past everybody else. But it's just filmed in a very odd way. So yes, I think it does deserve its place there. I think as car chases go, there aren't You know, On Her Majesty's is a chase-filled. It's ski chasing, it's car chasing, it's bobsleigh chasing. You know, there's a lot of chasing going
Yes.
on,
Yes.
and I think this kind of deserves its place there. Does, as you say, does it give anything to the picture? Well, no, not particularly. But
Really.
what
But it's
it
that thing
does,
of it's the first part of the chase when Bond gets to Tracy, it's all sort of dark at night, and it's that sort of late 60s filmed
yes,
day for night with the dark lenses and all the
right,
rest of it. And then suddenly you get to the racetrack and it's bright lights, and it is actually filmed at night. So
yes,
it's suddenly the black of dark, real darkness with the lights on and all of the glorious Technicolor of the cars and the advertising, hoarding, and the people and everything. It's really, really, oh my God. Yeah, it's
yeah,
bright suddenly and noisy and vigorous. It's really good. And then the nice little touch at the end when they leave, there's a guy, an official, he sort of leaps in to stop them, and then they get nearly run over and he leaps out of the way. And is that Peter Hunt? I'm sure I heard somewhere
with
that guy that jumps in front of the car. I mean, it's probably not because that's a dangerous thing to do, but
with the greatest respect to Peter Hunt, he wouldn't go anywhere near that with a barge pole. I suspect for a moment that, and plus he's probably having a cigarette holder at the same time, so I doubt very much any of that would have taken place.
right.
But I
Okay.
do understand that guy wasn't. I mean, he's not that's a guy, you know, a guy that they said you need to get out of the way of the vehicle. You go whoa, whoa, and then get out of the way of the vehicle. Well, you know, they probably filmed the entrance anyway, or them going out probably a couple of times, and on one occasion said would go in and go no, and then get out of the way at the last minute, and he just left it way too long. You
Way
know,
too late.
really,
Yeah.
you'd have been gone and maybe considering take two as the vehicle's going by, but I mean, he really left it the absolute death there. So, you know, part of me says kudos to the fella, and part of me goes, "You daft sod, what were you
Yeah.
doing? Get your ass out of the way. You're going to get yourself killed." But yeah, those peculiar moments that happen on set and occasionally are captured for posterity, and it's that moment that you go, "Oh, that guy," you know. But maybe people listening or watching to this, but maybe will go back and then look at this and go, "Oh, that guy. Oh, I
That
see what you
guy.
mean. Yes,
Who
he did leave that very late, didn't he? You know, all that sort of
who
stuff."
is he? What is just a random guy that oh well. But
Thrown
yeah,
in for
it,
good measure.
yeah, it's a great sequence. It's so
It
bright
is, and
and
it
busy
deserves its
and
place, I
loud.
think.
It's one of those things of examples of more is more. You just throw everything at it and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So how do we top that then? We've gone from, let's run through these. We've got the dam jump from GoldenEye. We've got Bond jumping down the gate, the gantry on GoldenEye. We've got the car jump from Man with the Golden Gun, the elevator grab from Skyfall, getting on the Disco Volante from Thunderball, and the stock car sequence from an On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Where could you possibly go from
We're,
there?
we're staying with On Her Majesty's Secret
Oh,
Service. It's just a little thing, but when you think about it, it's crazy. And the attack on Piz Gloria at the end, the helicopters are all sort of circling around,
mm-hmm.
and you just see these guys, the commandos in white, jumping off a helicopter onto a mountain, one of them with a flamethrower strapped to his back
Yeah.
and ropes and explode. And you're just like, okay, these guys are crazy. They're jumping off a helicopter onto a mountain, and it's there's a steep ledge that they're jumping onto. The top of the mountain is not flat in any way. It's a snow covered peak, and it's just obvious everything's going on around you, and the explosions and the gunfire and the music's going, and it's all fantastic. But if you think about it, you're jumping off a helicopter onto a mountain.
Yeah.
Who does that?
Well, on this particular occasion, Nosha Pal was one of them who went out there, and on the occasion when he was asked in connection with that. He said, well, luckily the snow was very deep there, and that they'd worked out that they could probably jump into it successfully. And, you know, back then there was a lot of those moments where you suddenly get a trigger moment that says, I could dive into that. I could dive into Terry Leonard on Romancing the Stone,
Mm-hmm.
doubling for Michael Douglas, going over the waterfall, was just to jump from the car. Vince Dedrick's gone one side, doubling Kathleen Turner, and
Yeah.
he's this side with Michael Douglas. And partway at the top of this fall, he says, I'm going to dive. And then changed his position midair and did a big Greg Louganer and dived into the water. And I think there's a lot of that going on here where, yeah, guys are jumping off left, right, and centre, and it's a good height
Oh yeah.
into very deep snow. Now, the issue, of course, when you land in very deep snow is getting out of the bugger. Because if you go down, if you're up high enough, you will go down far enough to make it almost impossible to get out without a St. Bernard, you know. And so that's why I think in certain situations they were happy with that. And Nosha has gone, I can do this, and has gone out and given it the beans and dived beautifully into the snow. And it's because you've got all that, you've got the downdraft from the helicopter, and you've got some of the snow going up, and
Yes, it's
you're
all
creating all of that in the front of the image, and then you've got him diving out the side, and it is a lovely moment. There's a couple of lovely moments on that. Alf Joint does a fall from the top of a gantry and rotates in midair, so he goes
Mhm.
over and then flips back, and then it's like a reverse somersault. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of lovely moments in that. But yes, I think it's another blink and you'll miss it moment, but it does work, and it adds a little extra to that whole attack.
Yeah, definitely. It just, as you say, blink and you miss it. It's just one of those little points.
And anybody who watches this or listens to the podcast is very familiar with the fact that I am constantly banging on about, you know, you've got the big gags, you've got this and that, and that's the expensive one, and this took a lot of takes. But it's those moments that happen almost involuntarily in between shots. So there's a little something in the background that's really much more exciting. We could just pay a bit more attention to that
Yeah,
instead of what's going on here. And that's a great example of that.
totally.
Okay, 3 to go. What have we got?
We now come bang up to date with Quantum of Solace.
Oh, I like the way you said bang up to date and then said Quantum of Solace in the same sentence. Well
Which
done,
is
you.
which, when you think about it, actually, yeah, that's still what, a 20-year-old movie. Hang on.
Oh, I do feel very old when I hear that, but yes.
Now, yeah, a lot of negative comment is thrown at Quantum of Solace, and while it is getting some much needed reappraisal,
Yep.
I still think it is a deeply flawed film. But the first few minutes are utterly terrific.
Yeah.
And this is like a 1-2. So I've separated this into 2 parts.
Okay.
For favorite stunts. The opening car chase and then the rooftop chase.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
The opening car chase is a real explosive starting gun to the movie, because it's not even like the car, you get into the car and then you're off. The cars are already going, the guns are already firing, and you're in the action. And the editing is so frenetic in the tunnel with that big truck that takes the door out, and they're spinning around and then spinning back the right way, and then into the quarry, and the way I think it's an Alfa Romeo saloon just spins off the cliff, and it's really short sequence, yeah, but it's so frenetic, it's amazing. I think it's a really good car chase.
Yes, I do as well. I like Quantum enormously. And I hear so many people going, well, the editing is too fast, too fast. Look at the situation that Bond is in at the start of that picture. It's supposed to be set about an hour after Casino, right? even though the car's different, even though he's now wearing different suits, even that it doesn't matter, right? Ignore all of that. It's supposed to be the same basis of the storyline. We have arrived as the camera comes flying over the water on the wheel of the vehicle spinning, and then you realize, oh, we're in a car chase scenario. And in a car chase scenario, you have flash moments of excitement in order to keep your attention more than anything else. And that's exactly what the editing has happened here. Dan Bradley, who's the second unit director, has, and of course, this is 2008. Along the same sort of time, you're looking at the Bourne pictures and how they have then gone on. Now, people going, well, Bond is only doing what Jason Bourne was doing. You have to look at the situation that the people who are making Quantum of Solace the action are the same people who are creating the action for Jason Bourne. So, they are going to dovetail each other in some shape or form. This is a great idea. Why don't we do this? Hey, this worked. We could do that. And so that's the type of thing they've done. The frantic editing, I think, works enormously well. It really does. It keeps me on the edge of your seat,
Yeah, definitely.
And as you say, there's those key moments along the way, the truck ripping the door off. For those people who don't know, the truck is being driven by Peter Miles. Milesy is also the bagpipe player in World Is Not Enough, whose bagpipes then turn into a flamethrower. Just throwing that in for additional flavor and color. But the frantic nature of it, the discovery of individuals like Ben Collins, who did a great deal of work on that, Martin Ivanov, who is the driver that does majority of the stuff in the tunnel and the spinning of the car once the door comes off and the control of the car. And, it's just unbelievable stuff. Really, really very, very, very good indeed. I was reminded of a lovely moment in Top Gear, I think it was, when they were saying, it's Bond in the Aston Martin against Alfa Romeos. Well, obviously Bond's going to win, because as soon as the Alfa starts driving, then it'll be parked up at the side of the road with the bonnet up, because there's clearly some problem with it. You're not a real petrol head unless you've owned an Alfa. And
Totally.
I think there's a lot of truth in that as well. But, it works enormously. It's very fast paced. And then it has that moment where it's fast paced. It's absolute unbelievable speed, and there's action happening left, right, and center. And then calm as you enter Sienna.
Yes.
Everything just calms down. A new font is provided on screen with the word Sienna written on it. I see.
Lovely.
And then time to get out. It's lovely. It's absolutely lovely. And then it's followed, not only that, but it's followed by a fabulous, in my opinion, guitar riffy theme tuney thing, which I like enormously, which everybody hates. But that's my take on it. This is this is the car chase and rooftop chase together. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying so. I think we're on number 8. So I'd say number 8 is the car chase,
right?
And as you say, get into Sienna, but then he opens the boot, and Mr. White's in there, which is a great touch as well. It's not he's just trying to escape; he's escaping and
taking him with him.
Mr. White. Yeah. Why wouldn't he have him in the boot? And you think, my God, he's just been put up with a car chase. And anyway, it's a nice little touch. But yes, and I am with you. The guitar riff of Another Way to Die. I love that song. I think brilliant. It's hugely underrated.
Yep.
It's brilliant. But then, yes, number 9 is, what is it? 5, maybe 10 minutes later, we've had the little chat with Mr. White, and then discovered the double agent in the room, and Bond is chasing after him. Mr. White is obviously escaping, and Bond is chasing the other fella across Sienna. And it's rooftop, running, sliding, all of the terracotta tiles are sliding off, and you think, oh my God, they're going to fall. Jumping from balcony to balcony, and then a bus, and then up onto the clock tower, no, the bell tower. and through a glass roof. And then it gets really good because you're on this scaffolding and the ropes and the cantilevered, I don't know what you call it, and they're hanging and swinging.
Mm.
And then just that little bit of Bond getting tied up upside down, fumbling through the glass on the floor while the other fella is at the top of the scaffolding reaching for his gun. And then you just get that beautiful shot when Daniel Craig sort of grabs the gun, lifts him up, and bang, and shoots him. And I almost think you could have had all of that section
Yes,
as the pre-title
absolutely. And that
sequence.
would be the gun barrel right there.
And that's the gun barrel. And that bang, that shot to camera, then you kick off with da-dang, da-dang,
Yeah.
da-dang, da-dang, and it would have been amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely
I couldn't
amazing.
agree more. Absolutely, I've said that for we've had these discussions a lot over the since, but probably since watching it again when they were re-released for the 60th anniversary,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole opening sequence from the car chase up to the end of that fight. That's the pre-title for me. I
Yeah,
really think the whole thing would have been just spectacular because now you know what the deal is.
yeah.
You know what's happened before. You know what the deal is. Okay, there was somebody inside the organization. Right, we've done that, and then coming out of that, it is the aftermath of all of that, and you
Mm-hmm.
start afresh. And I really do think it's a great sequence. Logistically, unbelievably complicated
Oh,
because you know
impossible. You couldn't even fathom
in
how you would do it.
in order in order to get all of that rigging sorted out, particularly for the rooftop sequence, but in order to keep everybody safe, uh, they brought in cranes, some of the biggest cranes you've ever seen in your entire life, and positioned them around the city of Siena so that they are above and they're with all the right wiring rigs attached to them. Um, and for running atop the top across the top. That's not easy to say, is it?
It's not, is it?
Running across the top of the roofs. Wow. Um, only 2 cups of tea in, and even now I'm not functioning terribly well verbally. Um, so all of that, and again, we see here um, Daniel doing much more than maybe he has done before. Um, he was doubled a great deal in Casino. Did a lot of stuff, but in
Yeah.
here does a lot more stuff
Mm-hmm.
physically. And that it's a timing thing, jumping from the window onto the bus and then down the far end of it and doing all those stuff as well. Also, you know, casting was very important. They casted Glenn Foster as the agent, who was the mole in
Yeah.
this. Doing that for a reason. You get an actor to fill that role. You've then got to train him. You've got to have intensive training. You've got to get him up to a certain standard before you start doing all of that. Glenn's got all of this training, so he's and has worked with Gary Powell before and knows the capabilities, knows what he's prepared to do. And then you've got to get a cameraman who's prepared to do that as well, because in these particular sequences, when they're jumping roofs, the camera is going with them as well. So a wonderful guy called Diz Sharp, who did a lot of the stuff on the Bourne, for instance, that moment in that Bourne chase, the foot chase, where he jumps from the roof and goes through the window and the camera goes with him. That's Diz Sharp doing that as well, because there aren't many cameramen that will run along and then jump off the edge of something into nothing,
Yeah.
which is the most important thing. So all of this, it's a landmark moment because it started the career for many individuals. One, of course, Bobby Holland Hanton, who many will know now as Chris Hemsworth's stuntman, works with him on everything. It's almost old school where you have the actor and the stuntman. Whatever Chris does, Bobby does. They're
Yeah.
contracted together. They work together. And he got to double Bond on his first job. You're going to be the Bond doll. What? So all of that jumping from the balconies and grabbing on and all that sort of stuff, that's all him. And then later on in that terrific sequence that you're referring to on the scaffolding, is a stuntman called Kai Martin, who had doubled Daniel in the previous picture, casino, and would appear later on again as the pilot of the helicopter in Spectre. So it's being flown by the Red Bull, for real, the Red Bull pilot, but the studio shots, the blue screen shots,
Yep.
are actually Kai Martin as the pilot.
The helicopter scene in Mexico.
In Mexico, yeah. So he makes a number of appearances throughout and is like a regular popping up. But all of these individuals together, coupled with the edit and coupled with the extraordinary logistics that go into it, do make it a remarkable scene. And I don't think that Quantum gets the applause that maybe it should do. It is flawed, as you say. It's got a lot of things that maybe shouldn't have happened, and many of them happened on the set. Like, shouldn't we get together and write the next scene? Because
Yes.
that was a lot of that was going on as well.
Yes, there was.
But
the stuff that he gets right, it gets really right.
Absolutely. Yeah, when he gets it right, he gets it right. Certainly.
It's so visceral as well. You know, they're jumping, and there's lots of body blows into walls. When he jumps and grabs onto the railing of the balcony, he lands with a thud, and it's a real oof. They should have added some Roger oofs into there. Oof.
Yeah, that's possibly the only thing it was missing. But the physicality of the Daniel films is Pierce was relatively physical to a point, but nowhere near the physicality of the amount of stuff that he's asked to do as an actor, and make it work on screen. And certainly that's definitely the case in that. So let's take a run through. If we just want to double check, there's a great, interesting collection already. Two from GoldenEye. The first was the dam jump. Then you've got the gantry dive on GoldenEye from the Arecibo. The car jump, Man with the Golden Gun. You've got the elevator grab from Skyfall. The Disco Volante getting on board for Thunderball. Then the stock car sequence on Her Majesty's, and the Piz Gloria diving from the helicopter during the attack, the car chase from Quantum of Solace, and the rooftop chase from the same picture. What's your last one? What could you possibly have chosen?
So the last one, maybe a cliche for me, is Octopussy, and it's the train rooftop.
Yeah.
It's maybe talked about too much, but it's talked about too much because it's so bloody good.
Yeah.
All of the clambering about on the top, on the side, underneath, it just has that great sort of old Hollywood adventure feel to it. And that first part of the sequence where Bond is running along the top of the train, and it's a great one shot. It's a long shot, and it goes on for sort of 20 seconds, I think, and it must have been a helicopter flying alongside the train. The train's going at speed. Roger Moore was running along the top. It's not Rog. Whoever it is doubling is running along the top of the train, but it's just because it's so wide and you can see the people in the train and the scenery's going by at such a lick. It's really good. It's just a really good wide shot. No wires, I'm assuming, no frippery, obviously no CGI. It's a guy running along the top of a train at speed. And it's great. And then everything else that goes with it.
Yeah, it's not talked about enough, I don't think. You know, you get lots of people talking about the dam jump from GoldenEye, for instance, or skiing off the cliff, or the parachuting from Moonraker, those type of things. But very rarely do you get people talking about this phenomenally complicated and extremely exciting sequence on top of a moving train. On top of anything that's moving is always exciting. Trains, you know, they're always very, very difficult because it's a huge piece of machinery, and there's no as I say, without wires, as you mentioned there quite rightly. There are no wires on this gag at all. The whole wire concept really didn't come in on a regular basis until much later on. And bear in mind that the actor here, Roger, is not on the train. He's on a train, but it's on a stage, and that's back projection.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the train sequence from Skyfall, for instance, both of the actors who are on top of the train are on top of the train, and they are wired on to the top of the train, right?
Yeah.
So it is done very differently. Would we have had the train sequence in Skyfall without Octopussy? No, I don't think we would have done. I genuinely think that the work that Martin Grace did and Paul Weston particularly, you can tell the difference between the two, incidentally, because and this is the only way you can tell the difference, is that when you see Bond running along and the back of the hair is coming up, that's Paul Weston, because his wig didn't fit terribly well and he was running against the wind. Whereas Martin was running in the opposite direction. That was perfectly fine. So that's the only way you can tell the two. Martin does a lot of the early sequences and then obviously had a terrible accident, and Paul took over for the remainder of that. And again, up to 3 or 4 people on top of the train at any one time, maybe 6 people on top of the train at one time, because you've got a camera crew as well in certain sequences, particularly for those moments where you've got the 2 principals, you've got Bond, and you've got one of the twins. You've then got Govinda further down, who's being doubled. So you've got all of those people on board. The way in which the carriage is arched, and
it's not a flat surface.
Not a flat surface. You know, you've got to be very, very, very specific with your footing. And again, the remarkable work that Bob Simmons did and that Paul Weston did and Martin Grace to get that sequence done. And the amount of doubles that are used on the pictures, and the doubling is just brilliant. I mean, really just brilliant. Martin doing the first part, Paul doing all of those remarkable things like jumping over the pipe, diving over the pipe as a pipe arrives, because the first time he lay down under it. And that was the first take, and then he thought to himself, they're going to see that in the rushes, and they're going to want me to dive over it. And sure enough, Paul, can you dive over the? So he dives over it, and watch it in normal speed, flies by. Watch it if you've got the facility of being able to watch it at half speed or even frame by frame. The landing is absolutely crucial. Takeoff, he needs to nail, because this thing's arriving at his location at 40 miles an hour. So he's got to go early in order to be able to miss this. But the landing is crucial, and his landing is not, a conventional landing by any case of the imagination, because when he lands, he slides, and he's got to be very, very cautious of where he's going in that split second as he lands. And so the other thing, of course, was the popping up from the carriage. The door pops open, he pops up and dives under the thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, the idea was that he would do that, timing it, right? We'll time it, and I'll go now. And you pop up, lie down, and then pass under it safely. But Paul himself, in the moment, you get into the character as the double. It's all very well doubling the actor, but you're actually being the character for those few moments on the top of the train, and had said to himself, I think I can leave it just a touch longer before I pop up. Just a touch. And the take in the picture, and again, if you've got the facility of watching it at frame by frame, look at how close he gets. It's, oh my goodness. I saw him the other week. I spoke to him regarding it, and it still makes me wince now. I know he's all right. He was in front of me at the moment, but there's a moment where you just go, he's not going to do it. The absolute last, you couldn't leave it any longer without the top of this thing being ripped off. Absolutely spectacular. and of course, finally, you must also talk about the dismount from the train, which, from an old school perspective, and that's what we were talking about, even in 1983,
Mhm.
is extraordinary. The entire basis of that landing rig was based on sandbags being thrown from the train at speed, but independently, because they can't go together. If they go together, they land in the airbag together, and one will bounce out, or one will. It's going to be a very
Yeah.
terrible mess. So Wayne Michaels doubling the twin has to go first. Paul has to just wait a breath before he can go. So then Wayne's in the bag, he's in the bag, and they do it separately. But to find out exactly where they needed to land, they stood on top of the train and threw sandbags off. Really? Sandbags? Oh my God. It's just
Not
unbelievable. It
an
really.
accurate science, is it?
Not,
It's
not,
not.
there's an element of Heath Robinson about the whole thing, but, very, very successful. And in the edit, it's just magnificent. It
Yeah.
absolutely works enormously well.
But as comparison, then you're saying Heath Robinson and fudging it and roughing it and seeing what works.
Mm.
By comparison, as we've said earlier, with the car corkscrew that was done on computer,
Absolutely.
looked
No,
so
quite right.
smooth, it was almost too smooth. You
Yep.
want a bit of the rough, you want a bit of the around the edges,
E-
just to
e-
give it that trim.
even though in this day and age we've got all the technology in the world, they could add vehicles to that
Yeah,
sequence now.
yeah.
Um, I probably talk about Tom Cruise far too often, and I apologize for those people listening and watching going, he's not going to talk about Tom Cruise again. Really, how much more can we take? But the moment when he is riding round the Champs-Élysées, the Arc de Triomphe on a motorcycle towards oncoming traffic, 90% of that traffic is not real.
Yeah.
It's CG traffic. But nowadays you can do that, and they look relatively real for the purpose of that frame and the speed of everything
Yep.
moving through shot. So nowadays that corkscrew jump could maybe be done differently and adapted, allowing for a real amount of reality, a realism about what might also be happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Are there people trying to? Is there a fisherman one side? Is there a boat in the middle? Is there a police car coming over the other side? Is there a family camping at once? And all these bits and pieces they could throw
Yes.
in at the last moment, and yet making it look far too pristine in order to get through. But yes, absolutely, the Octopussy deservedly gets its place there.
Now,
And how long did that take to get to that list, by the way? Because there's
well,
a
it's not
huge
the
amount of
list is
bits that
not quite
aren't on there,
finished, I must admit.
but
There's one more. I couldn't get it down to the solid 10. So
go
I'm
on.
gonna throw in number 11
Yes.
again from Octopussy, and it's on the aeroplane at the end.
Oh yeah.
Before, here we go, before Tom Cruise hung
Yeah.
on the side of a freight plane, they did it in Octopussy. Now, I'm not sure a horse could catch up with a plane going at takeoff speed, but he jumps onto the back of the plane
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
then just hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not Roger, bless him, hanging onto the plane, but
No.
it is someone on there. It's not CGI. He's hanging onto the plane as it's taking off, and then Govinda is ordered out there, and they have a
Out
fight
there.
on a plane. Out there.
Out there.
Yes, excellence.
Right.
It's brilliant. It's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
That's another thing about these movies that the teamwork in comparison with, okay, we've got some stunt people and we need to get this done. So you do this, and you do this. No, it's not as simple as that. Just because this guy can ride a horse doesn't mean to say that he's the best guy for the job. When you're on a Bond picture, you get the ability to be able to choose the very best for the job in question. Now, Billy Burton, who was an amazing stuntman from a Wild West background, was the second unit director on this particular sequence, and also the sequence with the horse getting onto the chasing the plane, and also for the pre-title sequence. And he chose a guy called Norman Howell. Norman Howell, a wonderful horseman, and many years later was Kevin Costner's double, and on Dances with Wolves, was the stunt coordinator on Dances with Wolves, and was able to the horse was an extension of him. That's how they worked in conjunction. Now, it's not taxi speed, or certainly full takeoff speed, but the horse is at full tilt. And I ask you to look at the sequence, look at the horse's ears, right? They're not bolt upright. They are right laid back, and it's put plenty of, the coal is being shoveled on, and that horse is almost at full tilt, really, which is the best part of 40 miles an hour. Now, when you look at that, you then realize that the plane is in front, and he has to jump forwards over the horse's head, which is in itself really, really complicated. It's bad enough to try and fall off the horse that way, but he's literally got to land on the plane. They've got special stirrups put in, L steps, so you're not going to catch your foot in anything. You're literally pushing away and pushing forward. And the horse has been trained after lots and lots of period of time. First, he's fine with noise, because you've got to have horses that are happy around loud noises. He has no issue with that. But once Norman's feet leave the stirrups, the horse will come to a stop. He's quite happy not to go any further. There's no point me chasing anything else. That's it. And so that's the first part, is him landing on the back and the plane then going away. There's a separate sequence then where Jake Lombard then takes over. So that's the all of the maneuver on the top of the plane, and then BJ Worth doing the rest as Govinda. And again, you've got a third person out there, because you've got an actual cameraman out there as well, with a mounted camera on the head.
Yeah.
Randy DeLuca doing all of these extraordinary things, and having those same issues that he always had with everything else, because he's got all this weight on top of his head. He can't just open his parachute like everybody else opens their parachute. It has to open much, much slower than necessary, because otherwise his head will snap back, and with all that weight, that's not great at all. So all of these things taken into consideration, and it is a breathtaking moment. When that plane goes into a barrel roll, Jake's on that plane.
Yeah.
There is, there's no cutaways, there's no nothing at all. The only addition to the plane was a handrail painted in and put on the side of either side. So they've got something to grab onto, but that's it.
But it doesn't even look like it's been added on. It does naturally look like, that's part of the plane that runs the whole length. And fine. It doesn't, you don't think, he's hanging on there and they've put that on. It's just part of the plane.
It's a propeller plane, and when you look at there's a moment where Bond is or Govinda is trying to slash Bond. He's standing on the wing, and he's doing this, and then you look at how close he is to the propellers, how close BJ Worth is.
Yep.
And because of the speed they're traveling at, his feet are lifting off. He's got handholds on, but his feet are lifting off. They must be just inches away from that propeller. It's unbelievably desperate to watch, but a remarkable sequence, and beautifully filmed and wonderfully choreographed. And I never notice the back projection until I then look at it and I'm analyzing it. But in the moment, the model work and everything else, you don't do it. You accept it because that's what it is. Yep. And the whole thing working together blends beautifully. It's seamless. And it absolutely deserves its place on a list like that.
Yeah. So sorry, that's my extra 11 for the top 10.
You are perfectly entitled. Done. You are perfectly entitled to add that. I'll accept that. The other thing I did ask my guests to do on this particular project is to look at something that's non-Bond related. So outside of the Bond pictures, we've looked at the gags there in the Bond pictures, but outside of that, something that you look at as a fan of cinema and you go, that's really special. That deserves its place on any list, really. And maybe we can have a look at why. So what have you come up with as far as your three non-Bond options?
I get a little bit excited. I get a bit
Right.
overexcited, and
You do get excited, don't you?
like
This is the thing, you see. It's nice. Get all excited about these things. Right. I'm ready when you. I've got my pen. I'm going to make a notes. Go on.
right. So maybe obscure. True Lies. At the
Yes.
end of the film, they're driving along in the Florida Keys.
Oh, yes.
The bridge is out. Jamie Lee Curtis is in the limo, hanging out, trying to get to Schwarzenegger's arm, who's hanging along the back of a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
And they grab hold of each other, and the limo just goes over the edge of the bridge, and she just, I don't think she doesn't even jump. She's just, it falls away from her. And it's just such an elegant shot. And it's a wide being filmed by a helicopter next to the helicopter that she's now attached to.
Yes.
And it's just really elegantly done.
It is. It's done, and it's done for real again.
Yeah.
And the stunt woman is Donna Keegan, and Donna she'd been doubling Jamie for a little while, but she was the main double on this picture. Hanging from the helicopter is the stunt coordinator, who is reaching out, doubling for Arnold, and he's has got hold of her hand. And you're quite right in saying that car is effectively being driven, and then she's still got hold of his hand, and he's lifting her out as it just goes over. And it's the way it's shot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The way it's shot means that they just separate, they fall apart from each other. And because it's being shot from a helicopter, with a Huey there, and then the car below, and the gap in the road, it's absolutely breathtaking. It really is. And it's worked for months and months and months of training and timing. The timing is the thing. The idea at first, I think they were riding the car along, and it would jump up and over a gap, and she had to be in the right place, and everything had to be in exactly the right moment to take her out of that and lift away as that car finishes its jump, and just to get it over and over and over again. It's absolutely magnificent. It really is.
I do remember the Oscars that year.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And Jamie was lowered onto the stage of the Oscars, hanging from a helicopter. And they did the little sequence about stunt work and best special effects. I just remember that bit of her being lowered on, and then they talked about some of the stuff that they did for True Lies. But that little bit I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, one of those great moments. Joel Kramer's a phenomenal stunt arranger, and that whole sequence is beautifully done from start to finish. And again, there are whenever Jamie's referring to it, she always refers to Donna. You know, she makes it absolutely clear that, look, I had some part of that, but the majority of that was done by Donna, and she did it remarkably well, you know. So it's nice that they're always in a situation where they can go, look, I genuinely didn't do this.
Yeah.
If you go back,
them over there, they're the ones.
Yeah. If you go back to lots of early cinema, and over my years of research of doing about stunts and finding out about how things worked, many stunt performers weren't allowed to talk about how they were doubling this actor, that actor, because the audience had to believe that actor was doing those things for real. Even far back as Harold Lloyd. Harold Lloyd was doubled for a great many of those moments by a stuntman called Harvey Parry. but he wasn't allowed to talk about it. And he had an agreement with Harold Lloyd that once Harold had died, fill your boots, you know. The issue, of course, was that when he did die and he was saying to people that I did that, nobody believed him.
Yeah.
That's the risk you take, you know. But nowadays, it is very important that the star says, no, no, I did not do that. She did that, and she was amazing doing that, and she needs the applause for that. But yes, I haven't seen True Lies for a long time, but
No.
always when you talk about True Lies, you remember that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, well deserved.
Yeah. Um, a quick little one
Mhm.
from Baby Driver,
Oh,
obviously filled
yeah,
with great driving, great
yeah,
car sequences, but the opening uh chase in the red, is it a Subaru Impreza, I
yeah. It
think?
looks that way, doesn't it? Yeah,
Um, and they're going through an alleyway, and he just does a 180 turn and then another 180 turn,
yeah.
and it just sort of whoosh, whoosh, and then they're off again into the next bit. And you just think, hang on, that's like a ballet move. It's so, the skid on it is so graceful, and so missing a car, missing a truck, missing a skip, and it just whoosh, whoosh, and yeah, it really graceful.
Yeah, precisely. The movement, and I think that was the whole basis of the action, and the whole direction of the action was that this has to look like a dance. It has to look like it's fluid. You know, you see cars sliding around corners. You see the tail whipping out and coming back and whipping out again. You see them just missing this, but this has to be very different. You have to miss this vehicle because of the previous movement that you've made. And it has to be all one fluid movement out the other side. And we'll put things in the way that look like they're about to get hit, but you just sail through it because that's exactly what you're doing. The guy working on the beats on the music that he's listening to, he's reacting to those cues. And it is. There's many phenomenally great shots. I think that's a drone shot as they go through, and then he's captured as that car slides through it.
Yeah.
And again, it's another breathtaking moment. There's so much great driving work in that picture as well. If you haven't seen Baby Driver, you should do. It's well worth the watch, and well, a good addition to this list as well.
And then finally, I think the holy of holies, possibly for me,
Oh,
Raiders of the Lost Ark,
ah,
the truck sequence.
yeah,
Indy gets onto the truck, into the driver's seat, gets thrown out the bonnet, under the truck, dragging along, climbs back on, over the truck, and then the other guy gets thrown out and he does exactly the same move, but obviously because he's not Indy, gets run over by the truck. But it's just people talk about perfect moments of cinema, and that sequence is just brilliant. It just flows. It's thrilling. There is not a single frame wasted. It's it's magnificent. It's magnificent.
it is. It's as good a 7.5 minutes on screen as you'll ever see.
Yeah,
Um, and
in a film that's chock full of magnificent moments.
yeah,
It's
there are many moments in it, I must say. And this one came together almost by accident because um, originally the stunt coordinator is Glenn Randall, who was responsible. He was driving the truck, right? And he was driving the truck when Terry Leonard, who is now doubling Harrison Ford, goes under the truck. And this happened because he'd attempted Yakima Canutt's stagecoach drag on a picture a few years earlier called Legend of the Lone Ranger. And what had happened was that we were talking earlier about horses and speed and how their ears go back. If you watch the footage, I did cover it. There's a thing on my channel about the stagecoach drag. If you want to have a look at that, and it'll give you all of the different examples of this in its varying stages. Terry's one that he did, I think it was 1980, 81 on Legend of the Lone Ranger. His horse and the team of horses, they are a 6-up. So you've got 2, 4, 6 horses altogether. And they are shifting at somewhere between 40 and the speed of sound, I would have thought. They really are absolute hell for leather. And the problem was that they weren't lined up properly. So you didn't have a row of horses and a row of horses. What you had was the two in the middle were slightly over this side, and the two at the front were slightly over that side. And there wasn't a clean gap down the middle for him to then get out. So he transfers to the horse. He then drops down onto the plate between the horses and is working his way underneath, and then gets to a stage where he is stepped on by one of the horses who is too close to him and is spat out through the carriage, legs first. And the carriage rolled over his legs, and he was in a right old state. He thought he couldn't walk. He thought he'd lost his legs, actually, at one point. Realized he still had them, but couldn't feel them below the knees, and had a dent in the back of his calf about that size.
Oh.
So, he was in a real issue. And then had been asked by John Milius to go and do Conan the Barbarian, which was supposed to be filmed in Yugoslavia, and for whatever reason, Tito, I think, was the major reason, it wasn't. They weren't allowed to film there, and it was put back. And then Glenn Randall said, "All right, I've got a job for you. Why don't you come over and do the stagecoach drag on the picture I'm doing? Only we're doing a truck." Oh, okay. And to get it absolutely right, leading up to that, they had a pick and shovel detail. Underneath, there's a little trench. If you look at it carefully, you see a little trench, just enough for him to get clearance between him and the underside of the vehicle so he can work his way down. Ironically, Terry getting a number of... There wasn't the biggest stunt team in the world either on this picture. You look at the amount of action on Raiders, there's only about 9 or 10 people on it, but Terry is driving the truck so he's doubling Harrison, riding the horse down the side of the steep incline there, transfers to the truck. So that's Terry. To then find Harrison opens the door and Terry is driving the truck. He then fights Terry and throws him out of the truck. And then Terry becomes him again for the rest of the sequence. And the guy who comes over the top is an Italian stuntman called Sergio Mione, and he then has that same fight with him. And it is an incredible sequence to think he's gone all the way under to come back, go out, and get back in again. Remarkable, absolutely.
Throw the other guy under as well.
The other guy out, So it's one of those terrific scenes that I don't think there isn't. You can't put a foot wrong in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Or every single box is ticked, and I think it's a great template for action cinema. And probably with the Jones pictures, after the first 3, it kind of went in a different direction. I'm a huge fan of Indiana Jones. I went and saw the last picture, but it's a very different movie compared to those ones before. And is that a good thing? Well, no, not necessarily, but I mean, it's still massively entertaining. But that Raiders moment is as good as anything you'll ever see in cinema, I think.
Definitely. And that's my lot. That's my list. Thank you for letting me share it.
No, thank you.
It's
a terrific list. It really is. Yeah, it's a terrific list with lots of great stuff on it. And for those other people that we'll speak to during this series of interviews and chats, and we'll try and compare theirs against everybody else's and find out why theirs is here and why yours is there. There's a lot of food for thought, but I must say I've enjoyed it enormously, and it's always a great thrill to talk to you, Chris, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Good list. Plenty of good stuff on there too, and nice that he could mention his 3 non-Bond action stunt moments. Just 1 traditionally. So if you want to have a crack at this, do so by all means. Drop me a line, behindthestunts007 @gmail.com. And maybe we can sort something out and we'll get you on here to discuss your favourite ones. If you want to catch hold of Chris on Instagram, he is 007 Bookshelf. If you want to catch him on there, I guess a big fan of the books. And if you're a big fan of the books, give him a follow. Next week, we're going to be doing something completely different, and then we will come back to the world of Bond and another guest in the not-too-distant future. So until then, it's bye for now.